What if we got to leverage that? We've got to find all of the people who care about the culture war, who care about the stuff that's going on and want the world to be better, to be an active participant in making that phone call, sending that tweet, and sending that email. Because what they'll do is, the activists they have organizations that go around collecting postcards, and then one day a member of Congress gets 8,000 postcards on their desk, and they're like, "Yikes! This is a big effort. We better do something about it." The activists will spam phone calls to companies and get people banned. They'll mass spam emails. It's time to play ball. It's time to get in this game, right? If there's a company that's producing a show and they're like, we're going to have Steven Crowder do a backflip live, then the company gets 100,000 emails, but from only 10,000 people. They freak out and think it's a bunch of different people. So what we need people who are actively paying attention to this stuff, who are watching stuff like this, to be the person who's going to send that email and be like, dude, I am not okay with this. Maybe if every single person who watch a show like this would send an email to Disney or to Netflix or to Twitter right now, especially with Elon, you might actually see some larger direct action. So this law is going to impact Twitter. Twitter's got a lot of leverage here. You know, Elon Musk runs Twitter, right? Newsom just convinced Elon to move Tesla back to California. Did you guys see that story from a month or so ago? Fucking crazy. So now Elon says, I'm also the CEO of Twitter, and if you make me do this, we're not gonna bring manufacturing back.
Yeah, and Twitter is also negotiating with EU and Germany, and they're abiding by those content policies as well, which is kind of problematic in itself. One thing we were talking about earlier, James, was the indemnification stuff with Elon in the merger. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I know. Look, let's kind of level set the conversation. Yeah. Give people some context. So I'll just give an example. So I represented a doctor from Rhode Island, Dr. Andrew Bostom, who was kicked off of Twitter for allegedly violating the 5 strikes rule for COVID misinformation. And what has come out of the Twitter files, some reporting that was done by, I believe, by David Zweig, is that internally, Twitter had reviewed Dr. Bostom's account after I wrote a demand letter to the company trying to explain how what he said wasn't violative of any of their policies. By the way, he was reposting and commenting on peer-reviewed scientific literature. I mean, it's the most kind of, and it's no insult to him. I mean, this is dense scientific material that he was trying to discuss, like scientists and researchers do. And yet, Twitter banned him under the 5 strike rule. What David Zweig reported out on was that Twitter had internally, subjectively concluded that only one of the 5 strikes were actually valid, and yet they banned him anyway, which led me to tweet out to my followers, you couldn't run a lemonade stand like this. You could not engage in this kind of bait and switch and abuse consumers the way Twitter abused Dr. Bostom and get away with it. To your question about what does that mean for accountability for the people who engaged in this kind of conduct. Now, if you go and you read the papers, the deal documents between Elon's new entity and old Twitter, there are, it's dense. There's dozens and dozens and dozens upon dozens of pages. But one question that comes up is it possible to hold the people that were engaged in this bad faith conduct individually accountable for cutting off, in the case of my client, Dr. Bostom, his access to more than 45,000 followers for his content, or anybody else, right, who's using these platforms to support their livelihoods? Is there any accountability? And the answer to that is, in the contracts, the indemnification obligations that Elon Musk's entity has to the old regime are extraordinarily broad. And so if you wanted to sue one of these individuals, what would happen practically is you could sue them, and they're going to send the bill for their attorneys to Elon Musk, who will have to promptly pay them. And ultimately, Mr. Musk would have to pay out damages in the event there was even a judgment.
I wonder if this is why Elon tried to back out of the Twitter purchase, because at first it was like, I can buy this, I can fix it. And then after reviewing with his lawyers, they're like, you're also going to be liable for all of these lawsuits. Everything you know about what Twitter was doing wrong is correct. And then when you buy it, now it's on you.
And now he's almost blown the whistle on himself and put all this further evidence out there, despite the fact that, he would have obligations if more people sue Twitter in the same way that Berenson's did.
Right. And to your point, I mean, that's a truly, I mean, it is, and I know there are people that will criticize Elon Musk, but it is a really extraordinary thing that he would allow that kind of level of transparency into the inner workings of the censorship apparatus,
despite the risk to himself.
So this opens up risk to him and his entity Twitter. Let's talk about the inverse. So are we fucking up by announcing that we're doing this lawsuit, giving them advance notice? You know what I mean? Like declaring to your enemy, heads up, we will be coming at you in 1 week's time. Shore up your defenses.
I don't think it's enough time for
I don't think they're
we already have it written.
I don't think they're going to be able to get any corrective measures through the legislature out there in the next week.
I guess that's the issue with government is like you can scream it, they're too slow to do anything anyway. Like it would take too long for a committee hearing to happen on addressing or assessing anything. I wonder though, how are they able to respond quickly to lawsuits in that case? I mean, certainly some state lawyer or whatever has to just immediately start drafting up a defense or something.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, the Attorney General's office in California will defend the suit as they defended, for example, the medical misinformation statute that was passed and that was enjoined recently.
That was enjoined.
Yeah, it was enjoined. Yes.
That was the one where they said doctors can only say what we tell them to say, right?
That's the thumbnail sketch of it. That unless they advance a particular narrative, then their medical license could be at risk.
And now that's enjoined. That is blocked.
That is blocked. That is enjoined right now.
Were you involved in that or no?
I'm not. I'm not involved in that.
That's great though. Fantastic work to whoever.
Some great work, I believe, by Janine Yoons.
You know what else we need is that the ATF ruling on the. Totally as an aside and just as a short derailment, the ATF executive was it the arbitrary change of policy from the ATF making it illegal to have a pistol brace. Like we are increasingly seeing government just abandon legislation and go straight for we've deemed it to be illegal. Have a nice day.
That is something that I'm very passionate about because Tim, to your point, some of the folks that are the most ardent advocates of that approach to governing will talk approvingly about those kinds of measures, and then they'll talk about our democracy. Well, interestingly enough, and not coincidentally, many of these major decisions are not being made by the democratic branches of government. They're being forced through administrative rulemakings. It's an absolute contradiction to present yourself as some kind of advocate for democracy and self-government when at the same time unelected bureaucrats within the federal government and at the state level too, and we saw that throughout COVID, announced these unilateral edicts that bind men and women, businesses, and infringe on our core rights. People need to just start telling these people, fuck off.
Yeah.
But the scary thing is like there's just too many people who have we see it with the COVID lockdowns. It's easier for them to get on their knees and lick the feet of these bureaucrats than it is to just tell them to screw off.
Well, it's interesting watching Elon kind of navigate the whole hate speech thing because, obviously no one likes it when people are hateful. No one's a fan of hate. And so, when we go into this position, it's like, oh, we're defending misinformation, disinformation, hate. No. But we need those terms to be defined and clear. Like you see Elon like showing these graphs of how hate on Twitter has gone down, and he's playing the game.
You know what the real definition for misinformation and disinformation is? Anything not reported by corporate press. If the Washington Post or the New York Times lies, they will use them as the official source. The New York Times could write, "Sky is green," And then if you tweet the sky is blue, they'll say that's misinformation. Here's our proof. And they will cite the New York Times. But the New York Times is just human beings writing bullshit on computers. There is no reason to believe the New York Times is any more credible than anyone else other than they're a corporate entity with worth lots of money. That makes no sense. But that is the standard by which these people operate. It's misinformation and disinformation. We have to stop it. Well, why is it that Breitbart, for instance, has like a low NewsGuard rating, but has broken major stories which are confirmed to be true? The New York Post publishes the Hunter Biden laptop and they say, oh, it's fake news. It's the New York Post. So I think it's like the oldest paper in existence now in this country, or one of the oldest at the very least. If it doesn't fall in line with the Democratic establishment and the corporate press, it's disinformation. But if a month later, the New York Times is forced to correct, then it was actually true, but retroactively,